noticed when we did the first missionary journey back in chapter 13 that he didn't really stop in those things. It wasn't really until he got to Lystra and Derbe uh, seemed to be his destination. I don't know why he didn't go on down to Antioch from Derbe, but he goes back through all those cities. But you see there that really those cities that he went through the first time, there wasn't much response. So Paul naturally thought that if he could not go south, he would go north. Bithynia was in the north along the Black Sea. That also was that also was a large population center, and there was a very heavy concentration of Hebrews in that area. This section is in Turkey today. Actually, all this is in Turkey. Verse 7, after they were come to Mysia, they essayed to go into Bithynia, uh, but the Spirit suffered them not. The Spirit forbade them to go south into the province of Asia. Then the Spirit forbade them to go north into Bithynia. He was come from the east. Where will he go? Well, there is only one direction left, and that is west. You see, it was not Horace Greeley of the New York Sun who first said, "Go west, young man, go west." Instead, it was the Spirit of God speaking to the Apostle Paul. So Paul kept going west until he came to Troas. He had to stop there because from that point he would need a ship to continue. Paul couldn't imagine that what he was to do or where he was to go from this point. In verse 8, and they passed by Mysia and came down to Troas. I think it is that if we had met Paul during this time of his delay in Troas, we could have asked him, "Paul, where are you going?" I'm sure his reply would have been, "I don't know. I'm afraid our next statement would have been something like this. Now, brother Paul, do you mean that the great apostle of the Gentiles does not know where he is going next? Surely you must know the will of God for your life." Then we would have sat down for a nice long lecture on how to determine the will of God in our life. Actually, it's more than likely God does not show you the next step. He shows you the end of the rung. I'm sure Paul knew he would wind up in Rome and be executed there by Nero, but all the little steps in between, I think that it would scare us to death if we knew them. So by and large, we live day by day. I remember I had a pastor ask me once, "What's my 5-year plan?" And I said, "I'm sorry, but I can't live much more than day by day." I've read so many books on the subject. It's too bad Paul didn't have one of those books with him at that time. Paul does not know the will of God. Why? Because the Spirit of God is leading him. See, we have a tendency, I learned a long time ago. I used to get out in front of the will of God many times, and I realized that when I did that, we look around and God and the Holy Spirit and Jesus wasn't there, wasn't in what I was doing. So I learned not to get ahead of him, but to look where he was leading and to follow the Holy Spirit instead of trying to get out and ahead of him and predict where he was going. Paul is simply waiting. Most of the Christian life is a waiting game. Rick Warren talks about that as the Christian life is mainly spent in the waiting room. It is going to take a mighty movement to get Paul out of Asia and move him over into Europe. And this waiting during it is Rick Warren talks about what we need to be doing while we're sitting